Uncle Sam's biggest disgrace. How did just 2 saboteurs sink a formidable American aircraft carrier? Why did U.S. Army soldiers kill 300 of their own officers in 1 year of the Vietnam War? And why were American Special Forces derisively called tunnel rats? May 2, 1964, South Vietnam, the port of Saigon. Suddenly, a powerful explosion rocks the harbor. Unknown assailants have blown up the American aircraft carrier, the USS Card. It would later be revealed that the terror of the seas was sunk by just 2 Vietnamese partisans using American-made explosives that they had stolen from a port warehouse. A team of combat swimmers led by the founder of the U.S. Navy SEALs, Roy Boehm, was sent to investigate the incident. From the report of U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander Roy Boehm, upon inspection of the aircraft carrier Card, remnants of a Hagerson demolition device were discovered, a charge used by U.S. Navy divers. For the Americans, this was a slap in the face. For the first time since World War II, one of their aircraft carriers had been hit. 3 months later, the U.S. Navy destroyer Maddox entered the territorial waters of North Vietnam in the Gulf of Tonkin. The ship was attacked by Vietnamese torpedo boats. American fighter jets joined the battle. The incident in the Gulf of Tonkin became the pretext for a full-scale U.S. invasion of Vietnam. A century before the Americans, the French had come to Vietnam. First came missionaries, then soldiers. In the late 19th century, France established a colony on the Indochina Peninsula, which included the territories of modern-day Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. After World War II, a war of liberation began in Indochina, in which the French were defeated despite support from the United States. In 1954, the Geneva Accords were signed, under which the unified Indochina, a French colony, was divided into 4 countries. These were Laos, Cambodia, and North and South Vietnam. North Vietnam was led by the communist leader Ho Chi Minh. In the South, American-backed protégés came to power. The governments of North and South Vietnam considered each other illegitimate. Soon, the political conflict escalated into an armed confrontation that drew in dozens of countries, including the USA, the USSR, and China. U.S. authorities feared that South Vietnam would be defeated by the North Vietnamese very quickly. They needed to change their policy urgently, not just sending military advisors to Saigon, but deploying regular army units. The states sent about 500,000 soldiers to Vietnam, along with special forces, aircraft carrier groups, and armored vehicles. The Pentagon was confident that such a contingent could easily crush the forces of Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Cong, as the partisans operating in the U.S.-controlled territory of South Vietnam were called. American commanders told their soldiers, "You will be fighting an army of peasants." President Johnson was not strong in foreign policy. During World War II, he had served in the Navy and believed that force was the main argument in any conflict. He decided that if he demonstratively waved a big stick, he would persuade Ho Chi Minh to make concessions. But Ho Chi Minh did not want to enter into any negotiations. To bring the intransigent Ho Chi Minh into his senses, the Johnson administration authorized an operation called Rolling Thunder. The U.S. Air Force began bombing the territory of North Vietnam. Here is what one of the organizers of the operation, General Curtis LeMay, declared. Either they, the government of North Vietnam, pulled their horns in and stopped their aggression, or we're going to bomb them back into the Stone Age. Over the years of the war, the U.S. Air Force dropped nearly 7 million tons of bombs on Vietnam. That is far more than was dropped on Germany during the entire Second World War. There was so-called carpet bombing, where everything was destroyed, and they didn't even spare the civilian population. One of the bombing targets was the so-called Ho Chi Minh Trail, a network of land and water routes that the North Vietnamese used to move troops and equipment into South Vietnam. The trails ran through impenetrable jungles teeming with predators, poisonous reptiles, and malarial mosquitoes. The Americans were afraid to send their infantry there. To demoralize the enemy, the Americans used napalm to burn down entire villages and wiped cities off the face of the earth.
They also sowed panic with psychological methods. Using loudspeakers near North Vietnamese positions, they broadcast funeral music, the cries of women and children, and messages from the souls of the dead. An operation called Wandering Soul was designed to play on the superstitions of the Vietnamese. The psychological pressure yielded some results. Over the years of the war, tens of thousands of North Vietnamese soldiers defected to the U.S. side. But this did not bring the Americans victory. They were unprepared for a protracted war on foreign soil. They also failed to bomb their enemy back into the Stone Age. The Viet Cong hid from air raids in numerous tunnels. They built real underground cities in the jungle, complete with ventilation systems, warehouses, hospitals, sleeping quarters, and numerous deadly traps. Because of this, regular American soldiers did not risk going down into these tunnels. Instead, they sent in specially trained fighters, whom the U.S. Army nicknamed tunnel rats. Tunnel rats usually died in agony. The partisans were great masters of unpleasant surprises. For example, they would hang a poisonous snake at the entrance to a house or tunnel. Here is a typical trap of the Viet Cong partisans. An American soldier would step on a camouflaged hatch and fall into a deep pit right onto these bamboo stakes. They were usually smeared with excrement. Blood poisoning was guaranteed. According to Pentagon data, Americans lost more than 1/3 of their personnel in such traps and minefields alone. Heavy losses, gigantic spending on the war, and strong support for North Vietnam from the USSR and China demoralized American society. An anti-war campaign began in the United States. Public opinion was against the war. Furthermore, when taxpayers found out how much the war was costing, which in today's money is $1 trillion, it became clear that these expenses were a heavy burden even for the budget of a powerful state like the United States of America. In November 1968, Richard Nixon won the U.S. presidential election. One of his promises was to end the war as soon as possible with peace with honor for America. The president began a gradual withdrawal of troops from Vietnam. This process lasted several years and was completed in '73, shortly after the signing of the Paris Peace Accords. 2 years later, North Vietnamese forces besieged the capital of South Vietnam, Saigon. On April 30, 1975, the Communists raised their flag over the Independence Palace in Saigon. This date is considered the end of the war, which lasted almost 20 years and claimed, according to various estimates, from 1.5 to 4 million lives.